So I'm here with Shaun Krijnen, and he's the man behind Menai Oysters along the Menai Straits. And how many years have you been oystering and clamming?
Yeah, shellfish farming. This is my 22nd year here now, so yeah, it's a long-term commitment.
Has it historically been shellfish along this there?
I know that there was people cultivating here before me. I think it originally started. Well, obviously, we had there was an old Roman settlement just over there, and I would imagine that they would have done various bits and bobs. And there's been early recorded sort of shellfish farming activities from about the 1850s, 1860s within the Menai Strait. But the particular area I farm came into fruition in 1976. Mm. So there was obviously somebody there before, because I was only 5 years old in 1976. So this has been operational since then.
Right, and you took it over then?
Yeah, I started in 1994. I did a marine biology and an MSc in marine science at Bangor University. Mm. At the time when there wasn't a great demand for marine scientists. There hadn't been the explosion in, gosh, we need to look at everything environmental before we do anything. So the job opportunities were quite limited, and having those qualifications meant that you were more overqualified to get some positions, but not qualified enough to get others because you didn't have the practical experience. So it resulted in a, what can I do? Dilemma. And I just happened to know somebody that had a little hobby oyster farm down here, and he wanted to quit, so I bought him out. And that's how it started.
The right choice.
Yeah, it started off with 12,000 oysters. I've got just under 1 million down there at the moment, and of course I do mussels. I probably do about 160, 170 tons of mussels a year as well.
Quite labour intensive. You go out early mornings.
Well, I'm not. Believe it or not, I'm not a very good mornings person. If it's dark on a tide, because they're 12 hours apart. If it's dark at night or dark in the morning, I'll go and work the dark at night one. I'm much better. I can work till 10, 11 o'clock at night, no trouble whatsoever. But starting at 6 o'clock in the morning's a nightmare.
Yeah, on these chilly, wet Anglesey mornings.
Yeah, I mean, it does get easier in the summer, when it's light at 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning and it's sunny, then you don't mind getting out of bed to work the tides. But it is quite labour intensive, the oysters especially.
Because you have to seed them and then separate them later? Or?
Yeah, it's all done on a bag and trestle system, so the oysters are actually grown in bags, and obviously that confines them. So in order to ensure that they keep growing, you have to constantly go through the bags to remove, to either thin them down so they have more room to grow into, or you are stripping out the ones that are ready market size, and that's a continual process. Only this sort of time of year, they don't grow that much. So you get a little bit of a respite in the winter, but you get a heck of a demanding sort of summer time, because everything's growing really fast, and obviously the more you have, the more you've got to sort. So.
Do you have to feed them? Or?
No, all the food's provided by nature.
Seaweed?
No, it's phytoplankton. Mm-hmm. So the microscopic algae and things like that are filtered out. So the process is cleaning the water, fixing carbon dioxide, and producing high quality proteins with virtually no inputs whatsoever.
Wow. Yeah, well, labour.
That's the if you were to compare it, say, with terrestrial farming with cows, you've got to provide feed, you've got to look after them, you've got to provide water, and all those things add up in an environmental consideration. There's only I think there's only a couple of species of insects that will produce protein more efficiently than an oyster.
Oh, interesting. So what's actually in the Menai Straits? Is it special for marine life, shellfish, and?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a fairly unique body of water in the UK, in that we have a very strong tidal race through it. So obviously this will select certain organisms that can tolerate the sort of, you know, the big shifts in tidal currents and things like this, as well as how it affects the seabed, and that'll in turn govern what can actually grow on the seabed. I mean, for me here, we could probably stock oysters at a density or the mussels at a density that you wouldn't be able to find in sort of Scottish lochs and things like that, simply because, you know, if we've got this strong current constantly bringing food through. There's no static water there. It's not just coming in and out. It's coming in and out, but it's moving side to side as well. So we get that real exchange of nutrients. So yeah.
Is it quite pure compared to other areas within the UK and worldwide?
It's no worse. It's, you know, it depends what you're looking at. If you're talking sort of heavy metals and things like that, then there are none, because we have no heavy industry here. So all those sort of contaminants you associate with industrialisation aren't present. We do use the sea as our waste receptacle. So these are the things that I have to consider. This part of the processes that I have to undergo are what's known as purification of shellfish. So they have to run through ultraviolet treated seawater for a couple of days, and this is effectively to purge the shellfish of any potential microbial contamination that they may pick up.
Why ultraviolet?
Because it smashes DNA. So if you have microorganisms, they get exposed to that, and the ultraviolet radiation destroys the DNA, so it effectively kills them. It's a sterilisation.
And so your background, really, as technical and academic as it was, has really given you an edge to a degree.
It has helped. It does help. It helps, you know, obviously, because I can talk to the relevant monitoring authorities on quite an equal basis. It's not a case of, you know, that they've all got their degrees, they come over and say what I have to do. I can argue my case, and as a result I also developed my own purification systems as well, which are... You
have to develop all your own machinery and everything.
I mean, this is the thing. Yeah, developed most of my own machinery as well. So yeah, so I get a little bit of extra. I do a bit of engineering on top of the old shellfish farming as well.
Yeah. So what do you have, like a skiff that you take out, or that's yours, the uphill struggle.
The uphill struggle, yes. That's a 12-metre mussel dredger. Which I used to use to go when there was... we've had a bit of an issue over the last sort of 7 years that there's been no real mussel seed settlement in Carnarvon Bay, which is where I used to get all my restocking from. So, I mean, that's why the boat was there. The boat was used for the husbandry of the mussels and the restocking of the mussels. But unfortunately, because there's been no seed at Carnarvon for the last 7 years, I'm purchasing from other producers around the UK and then relaying here. So, because obviously the Menai does give a particularly flavoursome shellfish, which I've not encountered anywhere else in the UK. So I look for a 3-month lay down here, so they pick up all the flavours of the Menai.
Right. Is that from the base of the Menai, the bed of it, or the water?
We do get an algal bloom here in May, June, and it's called Phycystis, and that has a particularly sweet taste to it. So, and obviously the shellfish will if you came here in May and June and you were looking in the little pools of water, it will look like they've gone rusty, and that'll be the aggregations of Phycystis.
So it's got a lot of minerals.
It's got a lot of everything in it. Yeah.
There's nothing from Snowdon, the runoff, that comes into it, is there?
You'll have like the Ogwen and things like that at the other end. So
it's Atlantic water.
Yes, it comes out, comes through the Irish Sea, circulates around the top of Anglesey. So it comes in through the St George's Channel, pushes up round, and then comes back, and then. But obviously we do get freshwater inputs from both Anglesey and mainland.
So how can you tell when you're reseeding? How can you tell what's down there? Do you dive, or do you...
I wait for the tide to go out.
Makes it easy.
It does, yeah, because obviously if we're looking at the moment, the tide's right up against the wall, but I don't know if you can see, there's a little green...
Still coming in.
Yeah, there's a little green buoy there. So effectively 140, 150 metres of this shore will be exposed at low water. So, and that's where I cultivate. There are advantages and disadvantages to intertidal cultivation. Obviously things grow slower. And you can see over there there's a lot of birds, and we get a lot of oyster catchers coming in, especially over the winter. You get resident birds and you get migratory birds, and the combination of the two can put a lot of predatory pressure on the stocks.
There's quite a few ravens in the Newborough forest. They would be oystering, wouldn't they?
Well, yeah, we have crows here as well. If you look on the road, you'll find mussel shells all strung all over it, and that's the crows are able to pick up the mussel, and instead of trying to peck them open like the oyster catchers do, they just fly them up onto the stony shore here or onto the road, drop them. Gravity does the work, and they get the free meal. So, I mean, I have to be careful because I can lose 1.5 tons of mussels a week if they happen to be.
It's quite a lot.
Well, yeah. You know, it represents quite a bit. So it's knowing the sizes to buy in, the time of year to relay them. All those things will mitigate.
And how do you describe the difference in taste between and texture, I suppose, between clams, mussels, and oysters?
Oysters? Well, I think all that is governed predominantly on where they're grown. They will adopt the flavours from the body of water in which they are
so
living.
They're somewhat similar in taste. I'm not a shellfish eater, so...
Well, yeah, I mean, the mussels do taste different to oysters. The oysters do have, I think, a greater range of flavour. There's more different flavours in there than you would get with the mussels. But like I say, that the flavour will change with seasonality. So this time of year, when there's very little food in the water, the flavours aren't going to be the same as they are in August when they are, when it's peak production.
Because you sell online as well.
Yes, I do. Yeah. I have an online shop. Yes. So.
What's that website?
It's menaioysters.co.uk.
So anyone can shop for oysters.
Yeah, just go in there, click shop online, click oysters and mussels, and away you go.
Yeah.
And if you buy 2 or 3 dozen oysters, you're probably paying less than the supermarket. You're getting them delivered fresh next day. So, you know exactly when I've packed them.
So do they go into big markets? The big food markets is where they're popular. Restaurants.
Yeah.
Pick
I mean,
them up
you
from
have
there.
to do that with the mussels really, because the weight to value ratio isn't great. But with the oysters, because they're a slightly more valuable commodity on an individual basis, they can actually be shipped by post and still be economically viable.
How long do they last once out of the water?
Oysters, believe it or not, will give you a good 3 weeks.
Gosh.
Yeah. Mussels depends on the time of year, but I guarantee my mussels for a minimum of 6 days, regardless of what time of year it is. But this in the winter time, they can go for 10, 14 days as well. But obviously, the fresher you eat them, the better.
So to prepare them, you would steam them afterwards. You would receive them on ice or something, and then steam.
Well, yeah, with the mussels, yeah, obviously. Whatever recipe is your choice, you can do, and however you want your oysters. Obviously, I mean, when I do the shows and things, not only do I offer them, in the shell, raw, but I also offer cooked ones as well. So there's the people who are thinking, well, I wouldn't really want to eat one raw, but they're more likely to try them cooked. You see, so. And I'll be adding a new addition to this year's seafood festival as well with oysters. So.
Are they good for you? Nutritious, very high protein, aren't they?
They are. Pound for pound, twice as good as most terrestrial proteins. They also contain, all the minerals like the iodine, the and the zinc and whatever else is dissolved in the seawater, they all contain all those. I mean, I can.
You don't feel that like the processing takes away that through the process where it kills all the bacteria?
No, because obviously that just kills whatever's suspended in the water.
I see.
That process. So obviously the shellfish stay in the shell; they never leave, and all they're doing is effectively cleaning their guts. And then, so all the nutrition, and because I actually purify them in the same seawater in which I grow them. It's being UV irradiated to kill off any microbes. So everything else is exactly the same.
So the quality of the water, is that a concern for you? Is that something you test, or government bodies are testing it as well?
I mean, I do my own shellfish testing, so I can always govern making sure that they are meeting the required standards. I mean, fortunately here they're actually better than much better than the standards actually require, which is nice. Obviously seasonality will affect sort of things like levels and things like that, but on the whole, the quality of the waters here are pretty good.
You can freeze them afterwards, or if you receive them, can you freeze them?
Yes, I mean, they can be frozen, but obviously, if you've got them fresh, they're probably much better fresh than they would be frozen. Anyway.
Yeah, you probably don't want to give away your secrets, but how would you actually look at a piece of water and tell where the clams are, where the oysters are, where the beds are? You get a feel for where they grow, or
what you need to, as long as you're providing the growing needs of the shellfish, you can put them pretty much anywhere. Obviously, like I said, the governing factors will be things such as temperature and food. So if you put them in an enclosed bay with very little water exchange, then the shellfish will suck out the oxygen fairly rapidly, remove all the food fairly rapidly, and then they'll either start dying or their growth rates will be so pathetically slow. Doesn't make economic sense. So what you're trying to do is find out this sort of area, because it's sheltered, so big bad storms and things like this don't really play a big part. And obviously we have the fast flowing currents, the abundance of food, so all the things here tick all the boxes that say thriving shellfish. You see, so, and the only thing that makes mine grow a bit slower is the tide goes out twice a day.
Why would that affect the growth?
Well, they stop growing once they're out of water, so they have to close up and wait for the tide to come back in. So, so obviously that happens twice a day, and it, depending on the state of the tide, it can be as little as 3 or 4 hours up to maybe 6. So, you can, out of a 24-hour period, you can lose between, I suppose, 6 and 12 hours out of every 24. So,
why are the two tides unusual? And it's the only place in the UK that has that, isn't it? But
no, it still has the same number of tides. It's just the way that the hydrodynamics of the Menai Strait work is it initially runs in from Menai, because the water is, as it pushes up past the Flean, it's pushing that way, and eventually what happens is it goes around the top of Anglesey and comes down the other side. So obviously you've got a shortcut now between the Flean and where Bangor is, which is the Menai Strait. So of course the water will push that way initially, but eventually the water that's topped round the island meets this incoming water and then starts to fight back and has the upper hand and starts pushing the water the other way.
Yeah.
So, and then when it switches, so you get effectively 2 changes of direction per tide rather than just the one change of direction. The tidal rate here on a spring tide in, say, February, March or September, October it runs at about 9 knots and rises at the rate of 1 inch every 45 seconds. So if you get stuck, you've got a foot of water in 10 minutes. So, and I've had machines stuck down here, and I know how fast that you're thinking, how the hell's that happening? You know, or I've been working and back to tide, thinking that I've got enough time to finish what I'm doing, and then, you know, within 5 minutes the water's round your feet, and you're thinking, no, I haven't got the time that I thought I had.
How deep is the Menai then? At its deepest, is it?
I mean, you've got a good 30-40 metres in places.
Can the tide itself be used as a source of energy, like the tidal mills?
Oh, it could be, but there's no way that Natural Resources Wales would permit any form of development within here. Because obviously, it's a special area, conservation and all this, so it has to be left.
There's a lot of bird life, isn't there, as well?
Clams they bury themselves, so they require effectively being buried in the mud. I mean, there is a mud bank in front of us here when the tide's out, but it's not. There have been trials for them. I tried clams at one stage, but they just, you know, certain shellfish do a lot better than others. The Pacific oysters do really well here. The mussels are pretty good here as well. They're much better at the other end, but because they're all subtidal over there.
So do you enjoy comparing it to other countries and other areas where a lot of the shellfish are grown, harvested? Do you think they do things differently in Norway than
I think with like mussel bottom culture the world over. You know, relaying mussels on the seabed it doesn't matter where it happens. The principles and the practices will all be the same. It's when you adopt systems such as rope growing or suspended net culture and things like this that you have slight differences. But in a lot of cases, either oysters are grown how I grow them, pretty much over the world again in bags, or they're in ponds and just laid on the seabed and then sort of thinned down in the ponds like that.